I think every civilization game has multiple reasons to prefer it over its predecessors and its successor games. I have played every version of Civ except After Earth and many of the unofficial, semi-official spin-off as well. I would recommend taking a look back at some of the other entries of the series if you really enjoyed one game of any one of the series, because they are all worth it in my opinion. Let's talk about all the games and have a retrospective of all of them so that you can judge and decide what's the next game for you. Let's talk about Civ 1. It is the game where it started it all, and it's still a solid game to this day. Plenty of it feels dated now, but it has some unique quirks, from its unique sounding of music pieces to the leader's dialogue and advisors in the background. You get a palace that would expand and barbarians that would come out of nowhere. Civ 1 is the simplest entry in the series, and so the player would rarely feel lost in this game. It is the game that doesn't really rely on having a history of the previous games that the players might have played, and make sure that everything is easy to understand and visual. In short, it is a much simpler game than its successors, and that is both a good thing and a bad thing. Civ 2 is and was a revolutionary title. You can tell that a lot of love went into every aspect of the game, and it really shows. From the live action advisors in government types, the game had far better diplomacy, and they tried to add more replayability in Civ 2. Taste of time with things like fantasy scenarios. It is simply more than Civ 1, and so while it loses some of its originality, like its simple unique charms, it is simply a fantastic sequel to one of the most well-known franchise in strategy sphere. Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri or Alien Crossfire is a fantastic game, and arguably the most personality-wise the best Civ game to date. It oozes personality. It does a lot of things differently from other games in the franchise. The tech trees are pseudo-random. Unit upgrades slowly, and you can choose what technologies to use with your units. Factions follow abstract concepts like science, knowledge, peace, and harmony, rather than being a civilization. The game is one of the few to have emergent story expanding in the background to your otherwise excellent civilization game. The game basically uses the Civ 2 engine with some tweaks, and I honestly recommend watching the Mandalore's Gaming YouTube channel if you're looking to pick this game up. It is an amazing game with good sound design that has aged well. I actually prefer it over Civ 3 when it came out, and it is one of the earlier Civ games that I regularly come back to. Let's talk about the next game, that is Civilization Call for Power or Call to Power. I don't know how to pronounce. Call to Power felt like a fan expansion to Civ 2, and in many ways is actually prettier than Civ 3. Call to Power tries to represent everything visually and does it very well. Its premise is that what if civilization didn't end in a modern era? In a post-modern era, You have space battles and sea expansions. In a way, it feels like you rush through the early periods of humanity to a postmodern content. Unlike SIP 2 or Alpha Centauri, you don't feel like the love seeping out in every pore. It is a well polished game that doesn't have the same finish as its immediate predecessors. With that being said, it does offer a lot of what lot of SIP players wanted. That is a more SIP 2. I like it, but it felt a little hollow with when it first released. Call for Power 2 is notably the Civilization title that the Activision did not have the license to use the name Civilization. This is basically Call for Power 1 with much better interface and improved balance and army size with better diplomacy and better handling of space. I think Call for Power 2 is a much better game than Call for Power 1 in almost every way, but it still does not have the feel of a mainline Civ game. I imagined it is almost perfect with mods, but I never went back to mod this game. The next game in the franchise is the mainline title, which is Civilization 3. It is actually my third favorite Civilization game in the series, but it is also one of the biggest leaps forward technologically. It is also a return to form following the Call for Power series. I think that Call for Power felt like a charming mess, and Civ 3 almost feels like it's a boring when compared to the rest of the series. At that time, this return to form is exactly what I was looking for. But it is also a game I simply do not have the desire to return to. It takes every idea from Civ 2 and Civ 3 and implements them well. The interface is good and the game is good and the gameplay is very polished and somewhat clunky at the same time. In many ways, it feels like a return home to the franchise after two or three very different games. I don't like the corruption features and felt like it punishes you for having a large and sprawling empires not in a way you would expect. Like it doesn't really stop the ICS, but it really feels like a annoying micromanagement. In it doesn't really stops the game from ICSing it early on, but it is a very ineffective system. It is very annoying and ineffective system in my opinion. Now, Civ 4 was my favorite Civ game by far when it came out, and to this day, I think it is still one of the best implementation of civilization style gameplay from any game series. With its expansion, Civ 4 has a lot of going on about it, like the natural disasters, the religion as a tool for control, and much more. Civ 4 is the busiest game in the series, which is a good thing for us Civ veterans, but it also means that the game has too much going on for someone who isn't really ready for it. It is an exact opposite of Civ 1 in that regard. Much like Civ 2, the game feels fantastic in its presentation, from its tiniest details like the title theme or Leonard Nimoy's tech quotes. The game also comes with extensive modding support and expansion shipped with fan-made mod that Firaxis adopted officially, some of which were stunning, including a Final Frontier scenario an XCOM-style tactical scenario, and fan-favorite rise and fall of civilization. The fan scenarios are truly fantastic and still worth a look today. Civ 5 was a very divisive game on launch, moving from stack-based square combat to hex-based non-stacking combat was perceived as a big step to many of the newcomers on the franchise, but it also perceived as a big step back by many veterans. It focused far more on making smaller civilizations viable. Many of the things it did really help to cement the series what it is today. It is also the game that makes the Civ franchise mainstream, which is a really big step forward in making the franchise much more stable financially. But it was not without its backlash, at least not if even with its expansions. Even with its expansions, Civ 5 is still far less complicated game than Civ 4. As I said earlier, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Civ 5 simultaneously drove away many of the long-time Civ fanatics while also bringing a lot of new blood. The expansion helped bringing up some of the players back. While it is still one of my least favorite Civ game, in parts due to the length of AI turns, it is still a very strong entry into the franchise. Civ 6 is actually a behemoth of a game. In many respects, it feels like it is an amalgamation of Civ 4 and Civ 5 and smushed together in between. Civ 6 forces to build districts surrounding cities, so cities are now spread out and each one is different and unique. The combat from Civ 5 largely returns with some refinements, but it splits the research and civics in a very different way. Now they are almost the two tech trees. I don't like this change very much. In previous games, you have one usable tech tree, and now it has divided into two tech trees with half of the usable techs in one tree and other half in another. It dilutes the concept very much. In many ways, Civ 6 is what I hoped Civ 5 would be. There are also notable entries from other adjacent series which I really want to mention. Galactic Civilization 1 through 3 are all the 1 to 3 are all fine games, each having a solid argument of being as good as any of the Civilization game of its time. I think Galactic Civilization 2 is a fantastic example of a game and still by far the best game in the series. Gal Civ 2 factions each have their own unique tech tree, making each species play in very different fashion. Another game that was released was Free Civ, which never sat well with me. I tried it few times over the years, but Free Civ can emulate most of the early version of Civilization in terms of look, but it never felt like a Civilization game to me. I don't know exactly what it has been missing, but it simply hasn't drawn me in. Other games in the genre worth looking into is the Endless franchise, specifically Endless Space 2 and Endless Legend, which has never replaced Civ franchise for me, but these has their unique quirks that are worth looking into. Likewise, Age of Wonders. I haven't played the latest version, but I do like the series. And also my favorite Civ alternative in this moment is The Old World from Soren Johnson, the developer of Civ 4. This is by far the best implementation of modern Civ alternative I have played this year. So this is also a game worth looking into. Overall, Civ franchise has many games and each game has its own unique fan base. You can like any one of these games and not have to play another, but you should try every one of them because every one of those games you offer unique experience that you can't find in another game. And makes no mistake, this is not an iterative franchise. They may look like it, but each game in the series has something that the other games did not have, and each game offers a different and unique experience which has its own fan base. You can like one game without liking any other game in the series because it is that different outside if you look beyond the surface level. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching.